The French Honeymoon is a psychological thriller about a Paris honeymoon gone horribly wrong. And we use the title, the first line of the book, which is also the tagline for the book, is sometimes Paris is a terrible idea. What I read very widely. I love all kinds of stories. I think I had this moment in my career where I thought, okay, what do I want to do next? And I had done a lot of young adult work by then in French, and so those two books in English. And actually, I wrote The French Honeymoon in between those two, Kisses and Croissants and French Kissing in New York. But I've always loved thrillers. I love suspense novels as well, which can be different, but I just felt I love the darkness. I think I'm someone who's really drawn to it. I don't really necessarily gravitate toward like body horror or movies with a lot of, blood or whatever, but I do love, the heart pounding suspense. And so it was suddenly like, oh, could I try to write something like that? And when you've written very sweet rom-coms, it feels like such a huge leap. But I feel like as any creative person knows, nobody knows what's going to work, what you're going to be able to finish and be proud of, what you're going to sell to a publisher. Nobody ever knows. So I think I came to the conclusion, and I might as well just write something that I'm feeling like writing right now, and we'll see what happens. I felt like I didn't struggle with getting into the adult space, as in terms of writing. But yeah, there are a lot of tropes in thrillers. Thriller readers are very smart and very clued into how twists work, and some can be very hard to surprise them. But equally, you can't. It has to be satisfactory, so the twist can't just completely come out of nowhere. That was very hard to get right. But I will say I had the idea for it at the same time as the title and the idea came to me together. And they just kind of grabbed me, and I put down that book so many times while I was writing it, and I always came back to it. I could not let it go. We meet Taylor at the start of the book. She's just arrived in Paris. She's allegedly on her honeymoon, but she's alone. No husband, no wedding ring, no suitcase. And the only thing she has is a bunch of stolen cash in her purse. And there's a sense, at least I hope, there's a sense of, obviously what happened to her, but a sense of, is she fleeing from a bad situation? Is somebody looking for her? She's both scared to be in Paris and to be seen potentially, but also extremely excited to be there because she's wanted to come all her life to visit and potentially on her honeymoon, which we find out where that honeymoon component came from later on in the book. So that's her. And on the other side of Paris, there's these newlyweds, Cassie and Olivier. She's American, he's French, who have come over from New York for their Paris honeymoon. And they're in that extremely luxurious suite. And it's like the dream, like on paper, or on the photos actually, because Cassie promotes her, like blasts her honeymoon all over social media. It looks like the dream honeymoon. But we quickly find out that she doesn't really want to be with this guy. Like he's the very handsome French guy who seems like he could be the perfect husband, but she wants very little to do with him. And then we find out that he also doesn't really want to be with her. They have to for now. So I like to play with the contrast of people who seemingly have everything, but they can't be happy because, they have everything together and that doesn't work for them, essentially.
In terms of how you get to know these characters once you began writing, would you talk a bit about how that comes to life for you? In your mind? Do you hear them? Do you see them? Is it?
Yes, I do. I do see them. I don't see them very, very clearly, but I do feel them, if that makes sense. I think Taylor and Cassie's characters were very well defined in my mind from day one. I think what was harder was figuring out what made them that way. there's a lot of family. Obviously, I won't give any spoilers, but there's a lot of family history for both of them, and circumstances and things that have happened in their childhood, in their life, that made them the way they are. And that took me a while to nail down and to figure out why they do what they do in Paris. But I do, yes, I think as I said before, like I feel my character's feelings quite deeply, and it was quite easy to get into their heads. Um, it was a little bit harder for Olivier, I think, because he's a man, and I don't really write male characters all that often. But he is French, and he moved to New York, and he had this situation where he wanted to stay in New York but couldn't. And I think that is not my experience, but it's close enough that I felt like I understand, I understood why he wanted to be in New York, and why he was so desperate to do whatever he could do to stay. And like a funny anecdote on that is, I feel like when I talk to Americans, especially New Yorkers, they don't necessarily get it as much as all my immigrant friends in New York, who we all know that we love to be here and that we wanted to be here, and there's no question as to why. It's like, it's New York, if you love it, you love it. Not everybody loves this city. Obviously, it's got its pros and cons, but I feel like the people who are here, especially from another country, love it enough that there's no question as to why we would, go through all the crazy immigration process to stay and all of that. That was the fun of it. That was the fun of, can you be in what could happen that you're in such a beautiful place that is so perfect for a honeymoon and have the worst possible time. But the ending was very clear to me as well. There were definitely some twists and turns that I didn't see coming, but I really wanted to do justice to what a Paris honeymoon would look like from an American perspective. Someone who's never been there, who's planning their honeymoon to Paris. There's a lot of people who do that. And I really wanted to make sure that they got their honeymoon that they wanted. They also got a lot more than what they bargained for, but so there was definitely some of that. In terms of, so I did want to utilize the city that way. I did want, especially since Cassie's so obsessed with showing it on social media, how beautiful it is. I really wanted to make sure I did her justice in how she saw Paris and what it meant to her. I did think through all the logistics of how the characters get from A to B, how they come together, how they disappear so other things can happen. um, but yeah, I think if you have a very strong sense of place in your book, you have to use it.